Oh,
Oh, wow.
hello everyone. For some reason, the countdown didn't play, so here we are. I'm gonna have to look at that afterwards. Welcome everyone to another episode of Cinematic Realms. I'm your host Gwen, and with me as always is Jared. How's it going, Jared?
That's sort of going all right. Starting things off with a jump scare seems kind of feels appropriate for for this movie and this franchise. But yeah, I otherwise, busy as ever, but happy to, as always, to be here and talking about another great movie.
Yep. Uh, yeah, it's been a busy week, and I entered today just feeling like, I gotta. I didn't try to get ready for the stream, and I have to watch the movie. Which, once I sat down and watched it, I was like, okay, I'm digging this. But sometimes I won't lie. Sometimes you enter Sundays and your feet are dragging a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, but no, I had a great time revisiting this, and yeah, we're going to talk about it. Just a little housekeeping first for people watching. I wanted to announce this. It's not a huge thing, but I mentioned it over on Blue Sky. I am as I progressively move towards moving away from more social media, I'm not going to be posting sort of announcements and reminders for this channel moving forward. For now, Jared, I know you're still on there, and you have been very good about posting those reminders for people. So for those of you who want those, do follow Jared, because he's been good about that. However, I find that 99% of the reason why I go on Blue Sky is to post those reminders, and it would be easier for me if I could just eliminate that and then I wouldn't have to go on there at all. There's a lot of great people on there. I have a lot of my friends are on there, but and more I've discovered that it's just not quite for me, just because for various reasons, but mostly I just don't find it fun anymore. And it's a lot less stress on my life if I just sort of cut loose. So for that reason, I won't be going on there to announce the streams. But as long as you're subscribed to the channel, and you will get those. You will see the live stream coming up, and if you follow Jared, for now you're still posting those announcements, and I think you'll be able to find us if you want to. So
I think so. I mean, I am all in favor of less stress in your life and less social media, and because one usually contributes to the other, I would say that taking a step back is wise. I am still on Blue Sky. I'm sticking it out there. It's, I don't get as much joy out of it as I used to either. I'm long gone from the other site, from X. We both are, obviously.
yeah.
So yeah, but I do feel, as long as, we're a small channel, but we have our loyal following, and I do feel that, like, we should do at least, a modicum of promotion. So I will take on that responsibility happily and allow you to wash your hands of it.
Yeah. Just as a side note, I will say that for all the issues that the other site had predating the big issues, which came later on, the sort of nice thing about it back in the day was that, yeah, there was a lot of seriousness. There were a lot of things that people were stressing about on there, and rightfully so. I'm not saying that's wrong. I think there's a lot of things to be stressed about, but there was goofiness and fun to balance it out. And I feel with the splintering of social media now, and these smaller platforms, which are not yet populated by like companies and accounts that are interested in posting stuff that like brings people joy. It's just a lot of like sadness and horribleness, and which again, it's not wrong, but it's a question of how much you need that in your every waking moment of every waking day. So I've decided that I don't necessarily need that much of it. So yeah, for me, it's just easier if it's one less thing that brings me to those sites. So, but yeah, and I hope you guys will continue to tune in. I really don't think, I don't necessarily think those posts do that much. I think we have our loyal audience at this point, and we're very appreciative of that. So yeah. Hi, Danny. Great to see you, man. Just another side note, I just want to say, like, every time I see you post some of your art in the Slack, Danny, I'm just absolutely blown away. You're doing some awesome stuff. If anybody watching this is in the Here Be Dragon Slack, be sure to make sure you take a look at Danny's art, because it makes me jealous how talented he is. But without any further ado, today we are talking about a certain franchise that we we know and love. We're talking, of course, about last year's Alien Romulus, directed by Fede Álvarez. And this has sort of been on the radar for something that we wanted to talk about for a while. And I'm glad that we're finally getting around to it, maybe because another Alien thing is just around the corner. But I'm watching this again today. I just had an absolute blast. This was one of my favorite movies of last year, and yeah, it's just awesome. I remember I went to go see this last. I saw this in theaters last year when I was on vacation in Maryland, actually, and I'm trying to remember if I saw it in the theater on an IMAX screen or with the Dolby Atmos sound. Mm-hmm. It was one of those two things. I think it was the Dolby Atmos, and good thing too, because this has a killer soundtrack. But I just remember I could not get my godmother to go with me to see this because she is like not okay with horror films, which is hilarious because there was a time when I would have been right there with her being like, no way, no how. But it's probably a good thing she didn't go see this, because I think she would have been really freaked out by a lot of the stuff in it. But needless to say, when I saw it, I just loved it. It had so many of the things that I treasure about the original Alien, as well as Aliens, and it had sort of that genetic DNA, from those original films that just resulted in me having a blast. So yeah. So what are your feelings about this film, Jaron?
Well, I also love it. We had mentioned back when we did our Oscar night special and reviewed our top 10 films of 2024. This was on both of our lists. I believe it was number 8 for me of last year. And we did not plan this. It's actually fortuitous that we're doing this stream now, because even in this big anniversary year where we've done a lot of different streams, this movie came out almost exactly 1 year ago. I think it was released on August 16th in the US. So a couple days off. But as you noted, we're kind of in an Alien frame of mind because we're both very excited for the TV show Alien Earth that's going to be premiering in 2 days. And so it felt like the stars aligned in a good way, this. And the thing about this movie in particular that I just found so almost refreshing was that in many respects, this is a more, it's the 7th movie in the franchise if you don't count the Alien versus Predator kind of crossover films, which is questionable. But this is a franchise that hasn't always had the greatest relationship with continuity, but I think that's one of the things that makes it fun. And this is actually it's a very interesting sequel because it's very much a stripped down kind of sequel. It's very back to basics. It kind of follows the, what a lot of filmmakers say when they're stepping into this world. They're like, oh, we really wanted to get back to the spirit of that first film, the original film that made us fall in love with this world. And this is a movie, I think, that actually does that and does that very well, while also honoring, the larger, mythos that has been built up through subsequent films in the franchise. This movie comes on the heels of, Ridley Scott's Prometheus and Alien Covenant, which were kind of more wilder, more ambitious films that kind of expanded the larger mythology. And some people like that, some people didn't. I think there's a lot of really good stuff in those movies, particularly Prometheus. I enjoy them quite a bit. But this was a movie that just from the moment I saw the trailer, I'm like, oh, this feels different. This feels much more visceral and much more in line with the original Alien. And one of the reasons that was the case was when I saw who was going to direct it, and I was like, and it was the gentleman named Fede Álvarez, and I was like, that seems like a perfect fit because even though he doesn't have the longest filmography in the world, people will recognize him as the man who rebooted the Evil Dead franchise and also did a movie called Don't Breathe, which is very disturbing and very good. And also The Girl in the Spider's Web. But this just felt like the perfect match of director and material. And from the moment I saw that first trailer, I was anticipating very much the kind of like absolutely visceral and terrifying sequences that we ultimately got in the movie. So it feels like a filmmaker who delivered on the promise of what he set out to make. And well, I do think that obviously it's a film that owes a great debt to the original. I also found that there was a lot of originality in it, and like certain sequences that I think we haven't seen in any Alien film before. And obviously there are, certain things that are very familiar, one of which in particular I'm sure we'll discuss, but I think that it's overall a film that kind of has the best of both worlds, being true to the spirit of the original while also continuing to push the franchise forward.
Yeah, and I think for me, one of the biggest surprises was that it actually did tie into Prometheus in particular before the film is done in a way that was both gratifying and really, really creepy and disturbing. And so, and it gives me hope that we haven't seen the last of David in this franchise, because that was like one of the things that I was like, oh, that's a shame that this wasn't continuing the line of those movies, is that I think that Michael Fassbender's portrayal as David is one of the best things to come out of the franchise, even though I think the two films he's in are flawed in their own unique ways. They also have a lot of really good in them, and one of those big good things is his portrayal. So I look forward to seeing his return at some point in the future. That said, on the Android front, we had like a great new addition to that legacy of characters in the form of Andy, played by David Jonsson, who I think possibly steals the show of this film and is just absolutely extraordinary. It's one of those things that you can always look forward to in a new Alien story is, who's our new light star android character. And looking forward to that continuing in Alien Earth as well. Looks like we're going to have a few in that. but yeah, I thought he was absolutely stunning. His portrayal was, simultaneously like endearing and adorable, and then like sort of fist pumping at other moments, and then also absolutely terrifying at other times. And just yeah, I just really wanted to highlight him before we joined because I thought he was extraordinary.
No, I agree that he is probably my favorite part of this movie. And again, he was one of the elements that I thought felt a bit fresh because
Yeah.
while every single Alien film obviously has, android characters, and many of them are among the best parts of their respective movies. Andy felt unique because when I saw him in the trailer, they really played up much more of the darker and scarier elements of his character that come into play later. But when you actually see the role he plays in this movie and his relationship with the main protagonist of the story, Rain, played by Cailee Spaeny, it's pretty unquestionable. I think that he is the sweetest android that we have ever met in this film. And yeah, even though that's a behind the scenes still, that's the real vibe between these characters. They are.
Yeah.
Rain refers to him as her brother, and it is clear that that is how she sees him. Even though he is a synthetic or artificial person, as the term he prefers, much like Bishop and before him, or after him, because I guess this movie actually takes place before Aliens. But in particular, just her loyalty to him and his loyalty to her is the emotional cornerstone of this movie. And one of the things that's most upsetting is when that loyalty gets temporarily broken by the events that happen with Andy's new module and new directive. But it means that when the ending comes and they are reunited, and ultimately we get the line where she says, "I have a new directive for you. Do what's best for us." It is an ultimate heartwarming and fist pumping moment of victory in this otherwise very bleak movie. And so and yes, like the thing about like just the little affectations, like the dad jokes. The dad jokes are so on the nose and so bad that it's like that is the actual. It's the kind of joke where it's like you play it once, you might groan a little bit. You play it twice, you might groan a little bit. By the time you do it the third and the fourth and the fifth time, you're like, this is brilliant. This is hilarious.
Oh God, yeah. And I want to expand that out to like you talked about the relationship between them being the heart of the film, and it absolutely is, and we're going to talk about that. But also, I want to say I think one of the big triumphs of this movie is how great the relationships across the board are, and the dynamic among the cast. I think it's one of the things that I think the last couple movies have sort of struggled with is character dynamics and the writing of like those interpersonal relationships. And from the minute all these characters appear on screen together, you feel that they know each other, that there are bonds between them, and it all feels very natural. And I think they did a great job with the writing and with the casting and the acting in this film. I just really felt all of those connections between the characters. So, hats off to the cast, who's many of whom this is the first time I'm seeing them, and I thought they were all just great.
No, I mean it's a pretty stripped down cast. I think there are only like basically 6 or 7 credited actors in the entire film, excluding like the bit players we get in like the opening sequence. But as you said, every single one of them feels very well drawn, and they all have clearly defined relationships to each other. I actually don't think it's a coincidence that in this movie about a sibling dynamic between Rain and Andy, that our main characters are actually three sets of siblings. There are, in addition to Rain and Andy, Tyler and Kay are brother and sister. And Bjorn and Navarro are adopted brother and sister. So we have basically three kind of unique dynamics of these three brother and sister sets. And then all the other characters have their interpersonal relationships as well. Rain and Tyler are ex-girlfriend and ex-boyfriend, and they clearly still have affection for each other. Rain also has a relationship and affection for Kay. Bjorn is kind of the one who probably ruffles the most feathers in the group, but he has his reasons for that that actually make a lot of sense. So as you said, I think that is one of the things that, again, even though I do agree that there was a lot of really good stuff in Prometheus and Alien Covenant, those character dynamics, they were more of they were crews of the ship, and they didn't have the same level built up of personal loyalty to one another. And these characters do, because we meet them in they're not only bonded by shared bonds of family, but they're bonded by shared experience. They are living in a horrible situation, and they are desperate to escape, and that gives this movie urgency and a sense of investment that's a little bit more personal for these characters, in addition to the incomprehensible danger of the alien that they encounter. So I think that ultimately, and of course the necessary dark Weyland-Yutani corporate shenanigans that are a staple of every single alien movie.
It's funny, I didn't even necessarily make this connection when I saw it last year, but watching it today, I was like, oh, tallying up more years of work required. That's reminding me of another another franchise of it's a prison by another name. Yeah.
Character in the opening sequence, the kind of the guy who's in the street on the megaphone, basically saying, "Wake up! You are all Weyland-Yutani slaves. They will never let you go," and that is borne out to be true. They are effectively slaves in all but name, making and there's that kind of heartbreaking, infuriating scene early in the movie where we see that Rain actually has met her quota, and then that bureaucrat is basically like, "Gee, we're going to double your quota, and we're not going to let you go because we don't have enough workers." And that is where you're just like, oh, fuck you, fuck these people, fuck this company. And that is one of the things that gets Rain, obviously.
No one is getting out.
Exactly. And yeah, I think this world could use a Kino Loy, but sadly we don't get one in this movie. These characters have to just kind of make their own way, and they do, even though ultimately it doesn't turn out well for most of them. But at the very least, they are making their own choices to try and do this, rather than just living and dying at the whims of the heartless Weyland-Yutani Corporation. So yeah, I think that is, again, that gives this movie a very relatable sense of personal stakes, in the idea that, we knew this. We knew Weyland-Yutani was a bad company, but we've never seen them. I personally feel like we've never seen them be quite this malevolent, in the sense that they're after the alien for their own nefarious purposes, but here we see just the banality of what they're doing to the people who they are ostensibly promising the future to, and it's a lie.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I know Fede Álvarez said the inspiration for showing these sort of younger characters was the little kids at the station in Aliens, and what happens to those kids if they grow up and and are in this sort of cycle of of the company and all this stuff, and it's really heartbreaking because that they stay on this, if they stay where they are long enough, it's a death sentence for them, and so that that desperation is real, and wanting to, as you say, like make their own decisions and forge their own destinies, and unfortunately it doesn't working out too well for most of them, but it's it's they tried, and and we'll see what fate awaits Rain and Andy. Something tells me in the next movie they won't quite make it to their destination.
Yeah, it's like Ivaga looked like a beautiful place, and I'm like, it's probably a little too nice for the alien.
Yeah, well, and to be fair, like these ships never reach their intended destinations, except for I guess Ripley did make it back in Aliens, where she wanted to go, just much, much, much later than she planned. But yeah, and I do want to talk about Rain, played by and I'm going to pronounce her last name wrong. Cailee, what is it?
Cailee Spaeny.
Spaeny, yeah, okay. And at least she's great. And I know, even though I have not yet seen it, I know I knew that around this time she had been in the movie Priscilla, and was getting a lot of critical acclaim for that. And so I do have to check that out. But I thought she was just great in this, and in that wonderful tradition of kick-ass, heroines in this franchise. And and provided they do continue on with this story for the next one, which I think is the intention, I'm very much looking forward to seeing both her and Andy moving forward, because I just thought she was fantastic, and gave a great performance full of like emotion and gravitas, and as you say, the relationship between her and Andy is the beating heart of this film.
And much like in the original film, like one of the things that feels more like grounded about her is, much like Ripley in the first movie, like she's a civilian. Like she has no special training or credentials that would make her feel somebody who we would think could take on the alien, but circumstances lead her to a position where she has no choice but to do so, and she acquits herself remarkably well in the circumstances. By the end of the original 4 Alien movies, Ripley had become such an iconic, badass that like you were basically, you forget the fact that she started out as a commercial, towing pilot on an officer on the Nostromo, and this was not supposed to be her life. And the other protagonists in the series, Shaw and Daniels from Prometheus and Covenant, they're not like soldiers in the traditional sense, but they are, scientists and, things. So they have a little bit more of an experience. But Cailee Spaeny's Rain, like her, I won't say innocence, because she's obviously seen horrible things in her life, but her just essentially like clarity of purpose is really what kind of gives her that essential spark. The idea that like all that she wants out of this is a chance to live her life in such a way that she will not end up like her parents, who gave their lives in the mines on this horrible Weyland-Yutani colony. And all she is seeking is that she wants to, live that life ideally with the people that she loves, her brother and, her ex and this group of people. But they, when she finds herself in this situation, you could almost forget at certain times that, she is meant to be the protagonist, because it does take her a while to come into her own. But by the end of the movie, it's clear that, like, in the Alien franchise, it will always come down to the young woman who has to save the day. And when she is, picking up that gun, and by the time we get to the incredible sequence involving the gravity being turned off and the alien and the blood and the floating blood, I'm like, all right, she is making her mark as a worthy protagonist for this franchise.
Yeah, no, that's a hero shot right there, if ever there was one. Yeah, just I thought she did a great job, and yeah, I think there is something about, again, one of the things, and I don't want this to sound like I'm dunking on the prior films, because there's a lot about them that I really like, but I do think you talked about how the character of Shaw and Prometheus was a scientist. I think one of the big problems with that movie is that you had people who are really educated and should and have degrees in science and all these different fields and stuff, who should know not to do certain things. I think there's something really, I think it's in part of the DNA of the original Alien to have these people who are kind of out of their depth, and are not like experts in some field. They're just trying to make a living, they're trying to survive, and so I think that that's what's great about these characters and about Rain, is that, like, they're just trying to get by, and they're trying to not have to live a horrible life on this godforsaken rock, and and so they go aboard the station with what they think is a pretty good plan, but they're completely unprepared for what awaits them. And I like the fact that Rain is the one who's not even supposed to get off the ship. Mm-hmm. She's like, I don't want any part in this. Andy says he's willing to help, so I'm going to let him do that, but don't you dare drag me into this. And then of course she does get dragged into it, and I just think there's something really powerful about seeing a character who kind of doesn't want to have anything to do with this really, and isn't necessarily is just, like I said, just trying to survive, and then having to sort of just, for lack of a better term, just get over that and have to plunge themselves into it and see what they're really made of. And I think that's what's so great about the character of Ripley, and I think Rain fits in that mold wonderfully.
Oh, I agree. And she is, one of the things is that, they mentioned early in the movie that, why she gets brought on this, expedition in the first place. And one of it is, obviously her ex-boyfriend, Tyler, cares about her and wants her to, be safe and come with them. But they are upfront about the fact that the reason that they are bringing her into this is they need Andy. And ultimately the only reason that Andy agrees to do this is because of his loyalty to Rain. She is his prime directive, which obviously gets complicated in a number of ways. First, with the knowledge that Rain, in an understandable but rather heartbreaking dynamic, can't bring herself to tell Andy that even if everything had gone perfectly and they had gotten to where they were supposed to go, he couldn't come with them because Ivaga is a non-Weyland-Yutani system, and synthetics or artificial people aren't allowed there. And that, you know, and that is a scene that's the heartbreaking scene where Andy realizes that, and then you almost see him processing, and it's just like, that's okay. If it's what's best for Rain, then it's what's best for me. And you're just like, oh no. She is just, but by the end, of course, Rain is basically just like, no, fuck this. We're together in this.
But also, like, he finds it out from Bjorn, who is the biggest dick in the world. He's like, all these movies require a character that you just don't like at all, so that you can actually be happy about at least one person getting killed by the alien. But in fairness, it is revealed that he's been through some pretty traumatic stuff, and quite recently. So even with him, there's depth there, and there's, you know, a reason behind why he's. I mean, it seems to me that he was probably, you know, a dick to Andy even before that, but it does add like another layer to it. And so, you know, he's still an ass, but but he does have, like, there's a reason for it. He's just not like the designated asshole character just because the movie needs it. What it does is also is it sets up the entire Andy dynamic going forward through the rest of this idea that androids can make decisions to, like, you know, they can make decisions to sacrifice, you know, human beings for if they're saving more than the people who would be sacrificed, and it's this whole, like, and it sets up this sort of dangerous dynamic that gets unleashed once his programming changes. And so I think Bjorn does, you know, serve an important function there, but it's just, you never like the asshole character, and that's him in this movie. But he does a really good job playing it.
He does. You know, Spike Fearn is very good in the role, and it's one of the things where, yes, like, this is a classic dynamic, not only of the alien, the synthetics in the Alien franchise, but in just the stories about robotics in general, going all the way back to, you know, Isaac Asimov's 3 Laws of Robotics, and the idea that, you know, the prime directive for all these robots is supposed to be they cannot harm a human being, or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm, and that immediately clashes with the reality of the fact that sometimes you have no choice. And so in that case, the robot becomes more of a difference engine, and it comes down to simple math of, like, as it happened with Bjorn's mother, like, the synthetic in that case made the decision that to sacrifice 3 minors, including Bjorn's mother, to save the rest of the group, the larger group of 12. And in the cold calculus of machine learning, you know, that was the correct decision. And similarly, you know, with the android character of Rook, he is operating on a similar principle, not just because he's a corporate, you know, stooge of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, but also because he's like, you know, your lives, your 6 lives are insignificant against the prospect of saving all of humanity. And that almost seems like his driving directive. But of course, we as human beings, we can understand that on an intellectual level, but we feel it differently. Like, Bjorn may know that was the logical thing, but that was his mother who died. And so obviously he's going to be furious and prejudiced. Like, we see a similar dynamic in the movie I, Robot with what the lead character, Will Smith's character, goes through in that movie. Like, a human being would have known and would have maybe made a different choice, we would like to believe. And in this case, you know, Andy is a character who he becomes, you know, he starts off as being loyal very much to this one person, Rain, and then when his loyalty shifts, he becomes, you know, a terrifying agent of the larger, you know, plan. And then by the time he reverts back at the end, we feel like, you know, he had, like, his that was never truly him. You know, that was a case of he was almost being taken over and enslaved himself, and because this Andy would never hurt Rain. And I think that by the end of the movie, that's what, Rain comes to understand that, and that's why their loyalty to one another ultimately is the bond that will not break. Because Rain doesn't have to go back for Andy after everything he had did. She chooses to and puts herself at risk for him.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it gets very tricky because at the end of the day, it comes down to, like, if it's a matter of programming, then it's like, yeah, you get into that gray area. But I think ultimately where Rain lands on it is it's less about okay, like what causes Andy to be Andy, but rather like what she is willing to do or not do for the bond that's been created between them. And I think, and she very much makes the decision that she can't live with herself by leaving him behind. And yeah, and speaking, you mentioned him. Let's bring up Rook, who was the surprise element of this film. And I certainly was not expecting to, hear that. I heard his voice before I saw actually who it was, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's Ash." But we find out this is actually Rook. We'll talk about this on a multitude of different levels. One of which is the technology aspect, but also. I do sort of love. I'm not gonna lie. I do have mixed feelings on the whole thing, but I think from a story perspective, it was brilliant. I think it's really great having, like, you instantly do not trust this guy just because of what the damn first. The first movie's crew went through with Ash. You're like, no, do not listen to one fucking thing he says. And yeah, and so I thought that was great, and just by virtue of the fact that we only ever did get Ian Holmes, android for that first film, and and other android characters have had their returns and continuations. So I do understand why they wanted to do it, and I think I do find it fun, and also, like, it brings a visceral, like, hatred of of the character with it. I guess we can get the technology conversation out of the way. Like, I continue to have mixed feelings about using, like, deep fake technology and respeecher and on all that stuff for these characters. They had the permission of Ian Holmes' estate. They predominantly used an animatronic, and then used CGI and deepfake to sort of to bring that alive, because if you looked at behind the scenes footage, the animatronic by itself would not have sufficed. There's still only so much they can do with those. I think for the purposes of the storytelling, I think it works really good. It's not perfect, but it brings the character to life for the film. I think the most frightening part of the technology for me is the respeecher, because they still have a ways to go with the visual element of bringing life to these characters. But the voice, man, it was good. Like, you could have fooled me that Ian Holm himself didn't didn't do the voice for the character. And after what they did with James Earl Jones's Vader and Obi-Wan Kenobi, even though for that they actually had James Earl Jones consulting on it, which was good. Not so much in this case. So I find that both terrifying and for the sort of purposes of storytelling, really freaking awesome, but also terrifying. I don't know how are you feeling about all this?
I mean, like you, I have mixed feelings. I would just acknowledge for the people who may have less mixed feelings about it. There are some people who hate this technology, hate that it is present in the movies. Anytime it shows up, it causes a visceral reaction in them. They're like, no, this is wrong. You shouldn't be doing this. And it, spoils the movie for them. I understand where those people are coming from. I do not have quite that same reaction because, as always with technology, it's not what the technology is, it's how you use it. And are you using it in a respectful way, in a way that actually honors like the human component of art, because ultimately this is just a tool. And yes, there is also specifically, I think even just beyond the technology, there is a resistance among a certain people of specifically using the technology in this way to bring back a character who was played by an actor who is now deceased. And that is, I get the ramifications of that as well. And my response is that, unfortunately, this is something that people can do now. And so, if they are going to do it, I'm going to judge it on the merits of each individual case with the basis of understanding that, yes, they had to get permission from Ian Holmes of State. That permission was granted. So that's the lowest bar to clear. And then there has to be an actual human component to the performance, which in this case there is, because there are human artists working on building the animatronic. There was Daniel Betts. Yeah,
Daniel Betts. I was going to mention, and I did read some more on this. He did actually initially voice the role, and it says his dialogue recordings were then modified with the filtering software Speecher. To be based on Ash's dialogue pulled from the original Alien. So there was a human component to the voice, but it was modified along with this. That makes me actually feel better about that than I did initially. I thought they were just pulling from Ian Holmes, archived dialogue and just spitting it out from the computer from that. I'm actually glad to now read that there's that it's based first off of a human actor's dialogue and then line recordings. So that makes me feel better about that, because that at least there's a human element there.
The thing is, ultimately, I'm sure that, again, putting up the arguments that other people would make, there is a version of this movie where they could have had this android character Rook played by a different actor who, was just giving the performance, and that would be that. And I think that version of the movie probably still would have worked. But ultimately, when it comes to this technology, again, if you're going to use it, you have to use it, responsibly, and you have to use it for a clear narrative and thematic reason. And in this case, I think that reason is present, because the character of Rook, he is not Ash, he is a different, android that shares the same face and model and similar motivations. But ultimately, it is a narrative device for this movie to use that likeness of the ultimate untrustworthy android that Ash proves to be in the original film, and to use that to immediately put us on edge and unsettle us. So in that respect, I think that in many respects, that was the point of doing that. From the moment we see that android is lying there on the floor, torn in half, we immediately are thinking, about what happened to Ash back in the original Alien. But then when we actually see, oh no, it looks exactly like him, then it's probably the most terrifying thing to have happened in the movie up to that point, including the fact that we've had a face hugger attack already. So, again, I think that ultimately it serves the story's purpose. So in that respect, I think that when crossing this very, difficult to walk line, I think that the movie managed to do it and threaded the needle. There are movies that have not done it nearly as well. There are movies that I think have done it well. And so I think that ultimately this is a case of me just recognizing on an individual basis, this technology exists. The artist made the choice to use it. There was a human component to it. And ultimately, for me, it works. And I understand why for others it may not. But I was never going to discard the entire movie on the basis of their decision to do this one thing. I was going to judge it on its individual merits. And to me, they pulled it off.
Yeah. I won't lie. It was jarring to me the first time I saw the movie. Just because there had been so much talk about, like, the sort of visual effects and technology they were using with this film, that like the entire promotion of this movie was based on how retro it was. And this felt at odds with that to me, because I did not know actually exactly how they achieved it when I first saw the film. So I thought they're doing like CGI and deep fake that's not really in keeping with their whole retro vibe for the movie. So I won't lie, it initially put me off a bit for that reason. Then I found out like what actually went into it, and that they had built an animatronic which was sort of doing the heavy lifting, and that's the thing, like they didn't use that much CGI for the face. They just used it a bit. The whole goal here was that it should look off, because this ash is not in prime working condition, and so it should actually look somewhere between like an animatronic and a real face. So for me, that's why the sort of uncanny valley, which there is a little bit, it still works for it, because it's not supposed to necessarily look completely like a real person. So yeah, and also, like, even if it was, I'm not gonna like hold it against the entire film for having an element in it that isn't like 100%. Go back to the original Alien, there's stuff that it's not 100% believable. I mean, that was a thing about movie making up to a certain point before we got into CGI and everybody expects everything to always look 100% real. It's like, back in the day, there was good enough. And and you just had to be happy with it, or you weren't. But yeah, and everybody has to make their own decision. Ultimately, I'm at peace with it, and I think it's worth doing for the storytelling reasons you mentioned. I think it's valuable to have this android, in the film, because of the tension that it adds to the story, and just based on what we know of Ash, and yeah. So for me, it's, it works, but I also understand people who have issues with it, because I initially had some as well. I not so much now. Now it's just part of the movie, and and I enjoy it perfectly fine. And I also liked once they brought in the elements from Prometheus a bit later in the story, like hearing this stuff from that android, it just was like this sort of cross-generational thing, coming together, which I just thought was really fun, having, Rook talking about, Mr. Whalen and, Prometheus Fire, it just like crossed that off the list of things I never thought I would hear, So yeah, for me, at the end of the day, I think it was worth doing. and your mileage will vary on it. But I like, but as for the actual character, like the fact that, like, it's funny, we don't really see that it's Ian Holm until like after, Andy is already, like they've already inserted his, chip or whatever into Andy. So if we had seen that it was Ian Holm first, it's like we would have been like, no, don't do that. That's a bad idea. But and that whole sequence where they're locked in the med lab with all the face huggers, and like when Andy comes back to life, like fully upgraded, for all the, reasons why they maybe should not have put that in him. It's such a like fist pumping moment to see Andy get that upgrade, and even after that's removed from him, he is like fixed up and upgraded at the end of the movie. So even though it caused him some problems, I think at the end of the day he'll be happy he got fixed up. But yeah, that whole sequence where like that face hugger is coming down on Tyler, and you just see Andy's hand like grab it, and and he's like, come on, let's go. And you're like, oh, holy shit. I just think that's a great sequence. Terrifying. Like that's the thing I think, like we talked about it a little bit, but like this movie so much taps into the terror of those original films, the first one in particular. And it's so funny because, everybody's heard me talk about how I'm not like, until you guys have started to corrupt me, I haven't historically been that much of a horror fan. The exception being the Alien franchise, which it's been at least somewhere between 10 to 15 years since I started getting into those films. And so for a long time, it was the exception to the rule of me like hating horror films. And so with every new movie that's come out, I've gone to it being like, I hope this scares the shit out of me. It's just so weird because that didn't apply to so many other things. Now I'm being corrupted further, and I'm on board with it for more films. But that's the thing. And this movie did a great job of keeping me on the edge of my seat and like having me thoroughly disturbed and freaked out. There's a sequence when Kay is like crawling on the metal grate, and you're just hearing the noise of the alien, and it's on top of the grate, above her, and you just see it, and then a minute later, off in the corner, you see it dragging the two bodies upward. And I was just like, yes, this is the kind of sick, twisted stuff we need in these movies. And I loved it to pieces. I just thought it's one of the great victories of this movie, and it's why I want Fede Álvarez to keep spearheading the next couple movies, because I just think he gets it. He gets what these movies are supposed to be.
No, and like, the original Alien is a masterpiece, obviously. One of the best movies ever, not just one of the best horror movies or science fiction movies ever. And that movie really kind of played on the kind of the creeping dread of the unknowable, of the, what is this thing? What can it do? Can it be killed? It almost seems like it can't be. And we'll get into that, because that was another element of the movie that I was like, oh shit, like they're actually doing that as well. But
which by the way, I just want to name drop, since I just had her picture up. Isabela Merced plays Kay, who she's also been in a number of other things, and most recently she is Hawkgirl, from Superman and the new DCU.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to have a special section just devoted to talking about her because I think she's wonderful in this movie. She's been on a real hot streak.
Yeah.
I had seen her years ago in things like Sicario, Day of the Soldado, and she was Dora the Explorer. But in the past couple of years, she is
She
not only
was she played Juliet in the Hulu movie Rosalind. Did you ever see that?
I did not.
She was really fun in that.
Yeah, but I think that specifically in recent years, it's been the triumvirate of the fact that she was in this movie. She was in the second season of The Last of Us as Dina, and she is wonderful in that show. She was the highlight of the second season for me by far. And then she's obviously been in the Superman movie as Hawkgirl. So I think that she's great. And the character she plays in this movie, Kay, is probably one of the most sympathetic characters that we have, because, not only does she seem like a sweet and genuinely good person, but also, she's pregnant, and we naturally are going to feel protective of her for that reason, which of course makes what happens to her all the more utterly horrifying. But that is another element that this movie kind of plays with in terms of specifically of the horror elements. By this point, we've had 7, give or take, alien movies. We kind of know how the alien works and the kind of the way what's going to be the event.
You don't want to be pregnant.
Yeah, you do not. You do not want to be pregnant. You do not want to go off and have, some intimate relations somewhere that's not secured. You do not want to go down into the depths of a dark area where the lights aren't working. But in particular, you also, one of the things that we, is just the absolute body horror of it. Specifically with the idea of how the alien comes into be with, bursting out of your chest, but also how it gets there, the face huggers, and what this movie does with the face huggers is some of the most disturbing imagery in the entire franchise, because I remember watching the trailer for the first time, and they include the shot in the trailer of them extracting the face hugger from Navarro, and just the length of the injector tube that was going down her throat and how long it takes them to pull that out. And that I remember thinking, oh, fuck. This movie is going hard. And again, if you know Fede Álvarez's filmography, you know that he specializes in that kind of stuff, like making the familiar feel more horrific. Because if you ever watch the movie Don't Breathe, that movie features the most fucked up and terrifying scene centered on a turkey baster that you will ever see in your entire life.
I don't even know what that means, and I'm like,
I'll tell you what.
Yeah, no. I don't feel a whole lot of impulse to watch that movie, even though it does have Stephen Lang in it, who I'm a huge fan of. But it seems like he's a real psycho in those films.
Oh yeah.
Not that he's well adjusted in, say, Avatar. But that's gotta be a whole nother level, I would imagine. But yeah, no, I just, yeah, it's one of the big things for me for this movie. I just loved how freakishly disgusting and terrifying the whole thing is. Which is, again, it's so hilarious for anybody who knows me and my squeamishness. But now I'm watching shit like Nosferatu, which is thoroughly sick. And so, yeah. And speaking of aesthetically about the movie, I want to take a minute to actually, you know what? I'm gonna hold off on that. I'm gonna get into that stuff after we do the mid-roll. Let's go ahead and do that since we're an hour in. So what we got coming up in the next couple weeks, not exactly been a secret. We've been, promoting our schedule pretty regularly. But next week we are finally coming back around to doing our 25th anniversary discussion of the Patriot, which we were supposed to do back on the week of 4th of July, and which I was not feeling that great, so we pushed it back. And looking forward to doing that. I was watching when I was putting this stream together and filling out the description for it, I watched the trailer for the Patriot, and I got reminded of how much I love that movie. And also, something we will talk about next week, it's got one of my favorite movie trailers ever made. I think it's one of the greatest things ever. It's also one of the longest trailers, but it's so good. So we're going to talk about that next week. And then after that, we're going to be talking about the Marvel film Thunderbolts. Following that, with the beginning of our Alien Earth discussion, then our 30th anniversary celebration of Batman Forever, which both of those things we're going to be having AK coming back on to guest with us. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And then we'll also be doing a 25th anniversary discussion on Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Looking forward to that as well. I'm going to see if I can corral AR into joining us for that. They're normally quite tough to get like scheduling wise, but I'm going to try and twist their arm because I know they love that movie a lot. So. But yeah, so. The other stuff that I just want to talk about real quick before we jump back into the discussion. I want to like throw out a thing for people, and it might surprise everybody, given how we are going to talk about Thunderbolts next week, so that should tell people that I have definitely warmed up to Marvel stuff of late. But I'm going to say, if you haven't gotten out to see Fantastic Four: First Steps yet, do so. I freaking love that movie so much. I just saw it for the second time in IMAX yesterday, and loved it as much as the first time. I think it's got pretty much my favorite musical score of any MCU film. And it tapped into like my childhood love of Marvel properties. So yeah, if anybody out there hasn't gone to see it, I highly recommend it. And just wanted to throw that out there. It's been a really great like summer of hope for comic book movies. Between that and Superman, I think it's overdue. We needed some things to lift us up, Jared.
I agree, and I think that in particular, I found the Superman just to be an incredibly revitalizing movie. Not just after the current era, the most recent era of DC, which I liked more than some, but I was definitely thinking I'm ready for something different. I'm ready for something more optimistic, particularly with Superman, and the whole refrain that has become kind of widespread online of speaking on the idea of kindness is punk rock, that I just think is like, that is an anthem that we can all get behind. Like the idea that this is like, we have a superhero who is making kindness cool again. And I'm like, that is something that the world desperately needs. And I think that the Fantastic Four actually, operates in that spirit as well, because it is a movie, with, world saving stakes. But ultimately, it is very much about characters who are going, as Sue says in her famous, scene, that like, the characters have to make choices, but they, at a certain point, they are not going to just embrace the, the false binary that like it's us or them. It's like, no, it's all of us. We will protect all of you, and they do in that movie. And I think that's why I do think it is one of the more successful Marvel films of recent ilk. And to be honest, even though it's weirdly kind of a different thing because it's a movie that deals very much about depression, I kind of found Thunderbolts optimistic as well, in the sense that I found that it was a movie about, yes, you can feel lost and alone and terrified and, like there's nothing for you and you don't have any place, but you do. There are people who can help you find your way through that darkness. So yes, I think overall I've been very happy with our output of superhero movies this year. And I wish they were all doing a little bit better. I even liked the new Captain America movie, but I think that overall we don't want to get drawn too much into the box office discourse, because I think that ultimately the movies, that's not what makes the movie successful or not. But yes, it is more reaffirming when a movie that has a positive, hopeful, uplifting message can also, be reinforced, so that we can tell, the studios, actually, yes, we want more of this. So yes, I would echo your appeal to, if you haven't seen either Superman or Fantastic Four in theaters, please consider doing so while there is still time.
Yeah. And it made me really happy, because when I was a little kid, my Saturday morning cartoons, among them were X-Men, the animated series, Spider-Man, the animated series. And even though it was lesser known and did not go on for as long, the Fantastic Four, and it probably wasn't as good as the other two, but it appealed to me. And I always wondered, was that just sort of because I was a kid and I wanted more Marvel stuff? Is that why I liked it? And I kind of wondered, because as much as I enjoyed the other films that came out, and we've talked about this before, of course, Jessica Alba was a big reason for some of that appeal. But I did sort of wonder, was it just a childhood thing, or did those characters actually tap into something? And I think that for me was the most gratifying thing about this new film, is it really reminded me of why I love those characters so much. And in a lot of ways, it almost it almost feels to me like this was my Captain America, the first Avenger, where, I think that, even though, or Iron Man, what have you, where it feels like, because I love and care about those characters so much, and because it was so well done here, it just feels like this is a sort of opening up a new chapter for my love of, of the sort of Marvel storytelling, in a way where I don't have to be snarky about it in the way I have been in the past. And I'm just, because I love that so much. I love Thunderbolts so much. And of course, I love the original X-Men. I could not be any more pumped for the Avengers film coming out next year. I just I'm just, I don't even know how I'm going to react when that first trailer comes out. It's I'm going to be going crazy. So I'm really excited for that.
I'm going to see that you are enjoying the Marvel's recent output. Although I have teased you in the past of being kind of a Marvel anti-hipster, or MCU anti-hipster, of you like the MCU after it was cool. But I obviously, I agree that there have been some ups and downs with the MCU of late. But this year, in particular, Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, I think, have been, some of their strongest outputs in the post-Endgame era. So the
fact of the matter is, it's just because the properties that I cared about were not, what we're getting explored in the MCU because of all the rights and all that stuff. So now that things like Fantastic Four and the X-Men are finally making their way into it, you could call me a sort of anti-hipster, but it's just because these are the properties I care about, and now that they're being brought in, it's that's why I'm having more fun with them, because I care more about these characters. So,
of course.
But yeah, so then that's about it. Oh, the other thing I wanted to gush about, you've already seen this, but I had to show it off on camera. I'm so excited. I got my 4K Steelbook for Master and Commander, which I've been enjoying the heck out of. So yeah. And I would have, speaking of great timing for talking about this movie, if it had just arrived a day sooner, it's actually getting here tomorrow. I am finally getting my physical media CD version of the soundtrack for Alien Romulus, which was finally released and shipped out after all this time. So yeah, I don't have it. I'll have it tomorrow. So I'll post pictures in the Slack. But yeah, there's that, and also it's on sale. The movie's on sale on the Apple Store, so it's been one of the top selling movies for the past couple days. So weirdly, it's all this Alien Romulus stuff happening suddenly now that we were doing a stream about it. It's all that's why. And that's why. But yeah, do you have anything before we jump back in?
No, I'm sure we'll circle back to some other stuff by the end of the stream, but I think for now I'm ready to hop back into this movie.
Speaking of the soundtrack, by a fellow named Benjamin Wallfish, I think that man thrives when he's working on Ridley Scott properties, because my two favorite scores of his have been his work on Blade Runner 2049 and this score, which I think is absolutely extraordinary. And what he does with the chorus in this movie, there are moments that reminded me of the really creepy choral sections of 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was just especially that opening sequence when the Weyland-Yutani ship is out searching for the alien and they bring it in. There's all this really disturbing choral, work going on in the music. And I just thought it was absolutely extraordinary. I think it's one of the best scores in the franchise.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's great, and obviously it pays homage to the score that comes before in the original Alien films, but it also forges its own path. And I think that Benjamin Wallfish is a great composer for that, because in addition to the Blade Runner 2049 score, which I think is an all-timer, I will put in a plug for another horror movie score that he did that I think is amazing, which are his scores for the It movies, It Chapter 1 and It Chapter 2. So that was the 2017 was really the year that kind of put Benjamin Wallfish on the map for me, and since then he's been, I think, one of the best working composers in this particular genre. He actually he also had another movie this year, the animated film Predator: Killer of Killers, which he did the score for as well. So but this movie, I agree, it's very, it's not the most bombastic score, it's very atmospheric and toned down in certain respects, but when he needs to go full out, he does, and it gives the movie the kind of the visceral thrill that you need.
Yeah, it's why I was really happy that they decided to, because initially the company that did end up releasing the soundtrack only released it on vinyl, which happens a lot nowadays. CD releases for new movies are becoming increasingly rare. But they ended up releasing a CD version on Alien Day back in April, or I should say they announced it. It took them months to actually press all the CDs, hence why I'm just now getting it. But it's one of the ones where I was like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and buy this because I kept listening to the score on Apple Music over and over and over, and I love it. And yeah, it's very. It veers back and forth between choral work, orchestral work, and then some electronic, sort of really disturbing, tonalities. And what I love is it brings in, like, it has its own themes, but also it brings in like Jerry Goldsmith's theme from the original, and also it also uses it's brief, but it also uses Harry Dresden Williams' theme from Prometheus. And I just thought it did such a great job of honoring the past while, having its own identity. So I think it's one of the, it's definitely one of the musical highlights of the series. And, maybe not on the level of the original Jerry Goldsmith or, James Horner's work on Aliens, but I think it's up there. And then on, just talking about more technical things, I just wanted to talk about, the entire visual look of this film with the set design and the cinematography. And I just think it has an out of this world look, and just the entire design of not only the planet, but but the space station, and the way it's like, the Remus side of the space station being so drenched in the aesthetic of Alien, and then as you make your way into the Romulus half of the station, it's going into more Aliens territory. I just thought so much of that was so brilliant, and really allowed this movie to sit in between those two movies in a really fascinating way.
Yeah. No, and the movie makes wonderful use of color too. The trailer for the poster for this movie, the main poster, as well as the secondary poster, like it uses red, obviously, as like just kind of the main color. And this movie has several sequences that are absolutely drenched in red light that just obviously set everything off to feel even more inhuman and unsettling and dangerous than it already is. This shot with Tyler, there are several shots with Andy where he's framed against like red light that makes him look much more menacing. The alien creatures themselves, but then even other color palettes, like you had that shot up earlier of Rain with the gun as she comes off the elevator, and that uses much more like the yellow backdrop, and that's a shot that feels like it could have been pulled directly from the original film, because like one of my all-time favorite sequences in any movie is the sequence in the original Alien where Ripley is trying to get to the escape ship, and there's a strobe light going off and the alarms are blaring, and it's like this is a scene that evoked that in the terms of the cinematography and the feel of it. And I think that
sorry, go ahead.
No, and I was just going to credit the cinematographer Gallo Oliveris. I hadn't really been familiar with his work before, but it's excellent here.
Yeah, and yet, like, even though like so much about the way this is shot, you're right, does like echo Alien, it's also feels right at home in Aliens as well, just because of like the gun and the fact that I'm just gonna say she looks quite buff here,
Yeah.
And so it definitely evokes Ripley, in Aliens. And and speaking of like homages, like this is practically pulled straight from Alien 3. And I love it. In my opinion, I think this is a better film than Alien 3. So I'm happy to have this type of shot in a movie that I'm more that I'll probably revisit more. But yeah, no, I just and then like this stuff here is very Aliens.
Yeah.
This is right out of Ripley and Hicks in that film. And I just as much as we like to talk about like how much nostalgia is too much nostalgia, I loved a lot of the stuff in this film. One thing I could have done without is "Get away from her, you bitch." I like that. That's a gripe. I think I would have been really happy if they had just stuck with "Get away from her."
Yeah.
And like that, but I think they went a little too far with it. But sometimes you can't help yourself, and I get it.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing is that like I have a pretty high, tolerance for nostalgia because I don't think it's always, an evil thing to have in your movies. Like sometimes there's a reason that you put this stuff in, and it's because people love it. And I think a lot of the homages are done very, tastefully. I would agree that "Get away from her, you bitch" moment with Andy is the one time where it's like, you probably crossed the line too far for me there. You can get away with it because you get one when you have a movie this excellent, but also it's just because like that is one of the most iconic lines in all of cinema, and you're not going to say it better than Sigourney Weaver. So maybe try to put at least a little bit of a different spin on it, and they do because Andy says it with a different cadence. He's like, the "Get away from her, you bitch." Like he can't even believe he's saying those words. But so again, David Jonsson pulls it off. It's just one of those moments where I was like, that I didn't need, but okay, you get one.
Yeah. It's. I do want to say, because I don't want to skip over too much, like when Andy does sort of go dark. Because I think it's some of his best stuff. I think it's absolutely like heartbreaking when Rain says, "What's your directive, Andy?" And he says, "I'm afraid I have a new directive: to do what's best for the company." And it's just so chilling.
Yeah.
And then when she says, "How could you do that?" And he says, "Do what? Leave someone behind?" Oh, that's cutting.
Yeah. It's almost a reminder that like it is still Andy in there, even though he is behaving completely differently. Because he remembers that the original plan is for them to leave him, and he's now going to use that as kind of a more cutting edge, with his new directive. But yeah, this is a case of just David Jonsson's like performance being awesome, because early on in the movie where he not just the way he's softer in his voices and his appearance, but also his physicality, because as we were in, Andy's motor functions are kind of degraded because he had been like tossed away as junk. And just the way he starts moving with much more confidence and assuredness after he receives the upgrade, like that makes him much more intimidating. But also he hit just the way he kind of he still has some of that spark that made him like Andy before. Like there's when the line is when Navarro has been implanted, has been seized by the face hugger, and they're panicking trying to get it off of her, and then all of a sudden we hear Andy's new voice for the first time, where he's talking about like, based on the rhythmic dilation of these bladders and synchronization to her breathing patterns, I surmise it's feeding her oxygen to keep her alive. For what purpose, I do not know. And then when Bjorn's like, "Who the fuck are you?" He's like, "I'm an ND 255 wave Nitani synthetic, originally built for mining and safety tasks. You guys call me D." And there's almost like a kind of that's a bit of the old Andy peeking through there. He's basically like, yeah, it's still me. I'm new and improved, but ultimately that
I do love his upgraded dialect, which is just a bit more like proper English. Which reflecting where the where the programming came from. Exactly. It's great, and I will say that is like the one moment where I'm lockstep in key with Bjorn, is when he's like, "I'm sorry, who the fuck are you?"
Yeah, no, I mean, it is really like a moment where we as you said, it's heartbreaking in the sense that we can like when Rain goes to, you know, remove the module and he like stops her, and we like, and it's not, he's not overly violent, but you get the sense of like, yes, like he is so much stronger than she is, and so much, you know, more dangerous because of now that he has a new priority. Like he still what makes it interesting about his dynamic is he's still helping them. He's still like trying to get them off the ship. He's just now doing it for far more nefarious reasons. And we are living in almost constant fear that when is the moment he's actually going to just snap and turn on them and decide that they're expendable. And you know, that moment ultimately never really comes because he gets
it comes for Kay.
Well, it comes for and I was going to say that is actually the moment that I wanted to focus on, because you know, one could, again, this is exactly that same dynamic that we had talked about with the android who, you know, ultimately sacrificed Bjorn's mother, and with Rook, is the fact that Andy is making the logical choice here, not only to protect Rain, you know, his original directive, but also, you know, to protect the greater number, to protect Tyler and to protect himself and protect the mission. But the way he's doing it obviously is coded to us as cruel and wrong, because we can see Kay, we can see how terrified that she is. We know that she's pregnant, and this is a case where, you know, our human, you know, instincts, even if it's not the most rational thing, would be to take that chance, that to open the door that's going to take 2 seconds to open and 2 seconds to close, and give Kay that chance, and accept the possibility that that might be enough time for the alien to get in and kill them all. That is a risk that humans are willing to take, and Andy in his new upgraded form is not. And that in his mind makes him the rational one, but to us, it's, you know, it's probably his darkest act in the movie. And ultimately, I think that is, you can debate the morality of it, but when Rain slaps him in that moment, you know, you feel like he deserves it, even though it's not truly who he is.
Yeah. Oh God. And yeah, and it's interesting. It says it's that module, you know, to take it out, and he says, "I'm afraid that's not in the best interest of the company."
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, and you get the sense that is and like this is all the very first time he's ever not listened to her, you know, and I think she just doesn't know what to do. But it is, I like that this all comes full circle when, you know, you get to the end of the movie, and like I think one of the things that it's one of those tricky things of like, perhaps for the first time ever, she does see him exercising his own authority outside of her, and it's not necessarily a good thing under these circumstances. And how much is that really his own authority? But it's the programming that he now has, so it's the company's authority, you know, that he's following that directive. But I do think all this, in addition to her guilt over, you know, the fact that she was going to leave him behind, like all of this culminates to get to the end of the movie where it's no longer enough for her to say that Andy is going to do whatever is best for her. That's why she says, your new directive is to do what's best for us. And I just really love that as a resolution of the journey that they both go on. You know, even though he ends up in worse, you know, in pretty bad shape after that, you know, but it seems like, you know, hopefully in the next movie, she gets to keep good on what she says about fixing him, which I think she will.
She will too. You know, androids in these movies have a propensity to get torn in half, but as we've seen in the past, you know, that doesn't always stop them from kicking. So,
yeah, David had his head ripped off, and he was he ended up back in tip top shape. All that, like, that is like one of the most horrific parts of his story for me, is that the fact that Shaw rebuilds him, and how does he repay her? By dissecting her. It's just, oh my God. Oh, but that's another conversation. But yeah, I don't think I don't think Rain is going to have to worry about that from Andy.
No.
So yeah, another character that we should talk about, just because she's the first one to go, is Navarro. You know, who, like, I will say, like, one of the real, I thought, like, really good red herrings early on in this movie is that I was certain that there was an alien in one of the pods. And and so, like, while you're focused on, like, her bringing the pods in and just waiting for, like, a face hugger or something to jump out of one of those, you're distracted from, you know, what's going on with the others in the group, and that they're going to, I mean, I saw the trailer, so I kind of knew what was coming up with them, but I just really thought, oh, this is how she's going to die. Wasn't that, you know, didn't have to wait that much longer. But yeah, it just, what you said before about, like, the way they visually portrayed that with, you know, them pulling the face hugger off, it, like, that is some of the most disgusting imagery, you know, in these movies. And I just thought all that stuff was great, especially once they do pull it off her, and like 5 seconds later, then all of a sudden, you know, she just jerks awake, and it's a really good jump scare. And you know, and you're okay. I wouldn't be too sure of that. Yeah. Yeah. And I will say, it's I'm willing to give creative license to this movie, because there seems to be a much faster rate of alien birth in this movie. But I always say that the alien life cycle takes just as long as the movie requires it to. You know, it's like, because in Alien 3, like, that life cycle for, you know, the one Ripley's carrying, it goes on forever. And, you know, and other times it goes much faster. So I'm like, you know, it's whatever. That's not a thing that trips me up.
In creatures is definitely, you know, plot driven in the sense that you know, but I mean, they do try to explain it in this movie when Rook kind of explains that the kind of their essence, the Z1 compound that he isolated, allows them to kind of upregulate or downregulate their metabolism kind of at will. And that's the kind of like the hand-wavy science explanation that can explain how an alien can be born from Navarro in basically like 30 minutes, and also explain how the alien that Ripley blew out of the original airlock in the original Alien in Nostromo survives in the vacuum of space for 20 fucking years, and they bring it to this station. That was always like, oh shit, like, you know, I always just assumed that, yeah, like Ripley did kill that alien, and it's like, oh no, they actually had, that was the original alien that they had to then it went on another killing spree in this station before they shot it dead, and then its blood, you know, caused explosive decompression, and you're kind of just like, oh, you know, like, because that was another thing of like, the original alien like seems so indestructible, and then even though they're terrifying in the new Alien, in the Aliens movie, it's like, they do become easier to kill when you have like guns and stuff, but it also is just a reminder of, again, yeah, that these are like some of the most dangerously designed creatures that you could ever imagine. And that we still, even though we don't know too much about like the specifics, we do know enough about their life cycle for it to be, for us to be aware of the beats that are coming, and that just makes part of the horror. Although I will note that one of the actual funniest moments in this movie that doesn't have a ton of humor comes in with the Navarro face scene when it's on her face and they're asking what's it doing to her, and Rook says the parasitoid is implanting the plagueis propitions into her, and Andy just looks and is like, I beg your pardon. It's like, what a seed that will amalgamate with her DNA and rapidly grow out of her. But yeah, that is it's an incredibly fucked up scene, and Navarro's death is also incredibly visceral because like this
cracked me up because that's the moment when like my dad walked through the room and was getting something. It's just as the alien was like busting out of her chest. I'm like, oh, of course.
Yeah.
But it's set up by like her discovery of that device that sees through, which makes for a really creative depiction of of like her putting it behind her, and like so we can actually see the alien like trying to bust out of her chest. Like that was really creative and disgusting.
Yeah, and it's made all the more horrific by the character who's with Navarro as she dies, Kay, and the way Isabela Merced plays that, where Navarro is dying as the creature is pushing its way out of her, and Kay is like cradling her, and it's like, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. And then when the chest burster finally does burst out of Navarro's chest, and Isabela Merced has that beat where she just hesitates as blood is spattered onto her face, and then she just lets out one of the most visceral screams you will ever hear, and it's like, and it's a reminder that like, yeah, even though we're now used to seeing chest bursters come out of people, like this takes us back to the original chest burster sequence of just how utterly horrific it would be to see this happen to somebody, especially for the first time.
Oh God, especially because she's the pregnant one.
Oh yeah.
So.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, no, I'm saving. I'm saving that. Yeah, so another moment I really like is actually when they're getting ready to go through the long passageway, towards the end of the movie, and and Andy turns on the lights and they see all the alien like nests and stuff, and Rain is like I think we should go back and find another way, and he says, I think that would be a good idea. But then of course Tyler hears Kay's voice, and he plunges ahead, which of course any brother would, and and then it's just like of course that's when he's it's time for him to meet his maker.
Which was another surprisingly effective death, that because I really like Tyler in this movie. I think that Archie Renaux, who portrays him, does a really good job of making him like you actually believe that he is a good guy who wants the best for not only his sister but for Rain and for all of them. And and I kept waiting for him almost to have like a darker turn, but it never came. He's the one who is constantly calling Bjorn out for being a dick. And he you get the sense that he actually is really committed to everybody. Like there's an actual heartbreaking moment in that scene that we had talked about where Andy is refusing to open the door for Kay, and Tyler just gets down on his knees in front of Andy and like bows his head and holds his hand and basically just like, please save my sister. And then it makes it all the more, heartbreaking and upsetting when Andy chooses not to. But that makes it all the more important for Tyler that when they learn that Kay is alive, that of course he is going to do everything he can to save her, and up to and including sacrificing his own life to protect her and Rain.
Hi, Laura. It's great to see you. Hope you're doing good. And like, it's funny because Tyler has a moment earlier after after Andy says, whatever is best for Rain is what's best for me. And Tyler says, you're a good guy, Andy. And I think Tyler actually shows that he's a really good guy just by virtue of the fact that, after Andy has refused to save his sister, he's like doesn't launch into like blind hatred of Andy, because I think he understands that something is going on with Andy's programming and that he's not acting, he's very like furious with him in the moment, as he would be, but then later there's that moment where he's showing Rain how to operate the gun, and he says, here, aim this and at Andy, and she looks at him and he's like, don't worry, the safety's on. It's like he is not seriously contemplating taking any kind of like revenge out on Andy or anything. He is a legitimately like good guy with an even and clear head, on his shoulders. And I just like the fact that that's who he is. There's nothing, it's one of the things that is like a pet peeve of mine is when you've got, characters who like in the final act of a movie will sort of act against the, what you've established for their character before. And like you said, have like a dark turn that isn't earned. And so I like the fact that they stay true to who this guy seems to be like throughout the film. And the fact that like the romance with him and Rain like never like comes back into play in a big way. They have a very close bond, and it's clear that they work together. But I love the fact that that's not a thing that becomes like a driving force in the movie. It's just part of their history, but they're still very close and they care about each other. I thought that was great. This movie did a lot of things that I just thought were really good writing in the sense that there weren't like those kind of character contrivances that kind of don't always work for me.
And the history between the characters, as you mentioned, is one of the things that kind of helps with that, because there's like the first moment that we meet Tyler in the movie is actually a moment where he's introduced we've established the fact that Andy is telling all these terrible dad jokes, and our introduction to Tyler is he reaches out to Andy. He's like, Andy, why'd the blind miner fall down the well? Why? Because he couldn't see that well. And Andy just looks delighted, and Rain just looks at him and like exasperated, like, please don't encourage. But that tells you a lot, just in kind of an economical sense, that Tyler knows Andy and knows Rain, and has real affection for them both. And I agree that like the romantic element between their characters, I think it's still present in the sense that Kay has that moment with Rain earlier where she's kind of like, I'm happy to see you, and I know that Tyler is too. And Rain kind of like smiles knowingly. And it's like, this isn't the type of movie that they're going to focus on like the romance. Obviously, it is kind of evocative in the sense of like the Hicks and Ripley dynamic, and then like, in another world where you weren't being hunted by these murderous creatures, maybe this would, spark something up. But in this case, it's just a recognition of, these two people seeing each other and valuing each other. And it is notable that Tyler gives his life to save, Rain. He jumps in front of the alien when it's about to impale her with its tail. So
yeah, he sacrifices himself in essence to save the women of his life. Jumps right in front of them. I thought that was such a, it's a beautiful end for the character, maybe not so beautiful in the somehow he ultimately goes out, but if you have to give your life, for something, I think that's what he would choose to do. And then he gets, brought up that hole and meets his grisly fate.
Yeah. There's something about the alien using its little mouth within a mouth to get up close and personal, and then just punch into the skull of whoever it's holding in its grips. That's just an extra dick move on the part of the alien. It's you didn't need to do that, but that's just this is a reminder that these aliens are kind of sadistic in their their ways.
God, I have we have just sort of taken it for granted talking about the movie so far that people are accustomed with how terrifying the design of the alien is. But I just want to do a mandatory shout out to H.R. Giger for his disgusting imagination, and for all the people who worked on this film bringing that to life. It's just, I have been terrified of this fucking thing since I was a little kid. When I saw the movie way younger than I should have, from underneath a pillow, because for some ungodly reason my parents had me in the room while I had the movie on. And it's the stuff of nightmares. It really is. And there's a thing at one of the parts, I don't remember if it's I'm guessing it was Universal Studios or maybe it was Disney. I don't know. It doesn't seem a very Disney thing. Maybe it was Universal or Hollywood Studios, where it's just and it's a pretty tame, it's just a ride through film history, I think, or something like that. But I was really little when I was on it, and there's just this part where an alien comes through the wall off to the side at you, and I just remember being scared shitless. And so yeah, this goddamn thing has been terrifying me since I was a little kid, and now I love it. I absolutely love how scared I get from the alien. Yeah, and we haven't even talked about the new mutation of it that we get at the end of this film. We're getting there. But yeah, and then everything to do with the anti-gravity, and all that stuff. I thought that was so creative, just both when they're going up and down the elevator shafts, but also when they turn off the gravity and Rain starts firing off the gun, and then they're oh shit, we have to get through all this acid that's just floating in midair. I thought that was really cool. And again, something we haven't seen before in these movies, and sometimes that's hard to do. It's hard to give us new stuff that we haven't seen with these creatures and escaping them and all that stuff, and so I thought it was really cool the way they did that.
Two such sequences like that for me in this movie. One of which was the earlier sequence where they're crossing between the modules, and they have to raise the temperature of the room to kind of mask themselves from the parasitoids, because from the face huggers, because they're blind, they can't see them, but they sense them through body heat and motion. And that's the type of sequence that, like, it feels like the Alien franchise has already done something like this, but in this case, you've never seen it quite this way. And obviously, you know that we're just counting down the moments until something fucked up is going to happen. It's like, is one of them going to panic? Is one of them going to have just like a bead of sweat coming down? And it's like, and it's the most heartbreaking way of all that they do it, where it's like, they're actually getting through successfully, and then it's the fact that Kay, unaware of what's happening to them, is calling out to her brother for help, and he's having to listen to her silently, being hunted by the creature, and then finally you see the tears and the sweat and the goosebumps start to come up, and you're just like, and you completely understand, but you're just like, fuck, and then the moment when Andy just looks at them and says, run. Yeah.
Oh, so good. And I'll tell you what this sequence reminded me of. It was actually the direct-to-video sequel, Tremors 2 Aftershocks, when they had to like adjust their body temperature to like get through these crowds of the little mutated, tremor creatures. I'm sure it's a staple in other horror movies, that type of thing. But that's what it reminded me of in my limited experience of of horror film watching. And so, yeah, no, I thought that was great. And I love the fact that like it's nothing has quite happened yet. It's like the face huggers are about to spring, but it's just that moment of quiet. And Andy knows what's about to happen. He's just like, run. And, it's just, the tension just ratchets up. And yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So I love that sequence, but yeah, you had mentioned earlier, I think the movie's signature sequence is the like by far the most innovative and creative is the blood in the zero gravity. Just because it's so cool, it's so innovative, and it is so tension inspiring, because as terrible as it is to get dissected by the aliens, it's almost more horrifying whenever somebody dies like just by getting splashed by their blood, like as happened to
Bjorn.
Yeah, like what happened to Bjorn in that movie.
Yeah.
In this movie, what happens to like characters like in Aliens. I'm forgetting the name of Mark Ralston's character. Is it Frost? No, it's Drake. Who gets but like and then when they're having to make their way through, like it seems impossible. Like where they're twisting around. There's that moment where Rain almost is on an inevitable collision course with some of the blood, and then she has to use the gun to like kick herself down, and then you think like, oh my god, they're doing it, and then you remember about the thing that they established earlier in the movie, which is the gravity well purges, and then when that starts to happen, you're like, oh fuck.
Oh man. Yeah. Fuck. And yeah, and we talked about like Andy being a badass and the elevator shaft, and like, and aside from like, and I know I like said I'm not crazy about the line, but everything aside from that is freaking great. Yeah. I just, I absolutely love him getting to be like a hero in that moment. And like, it's the fact that like, that's sort of one of the fun developments of this part of the movie. Once like she gets him to agree to let her take out the chip or whatever. And she says, you won't survive, and that's not what's in the best interest of the company or me. Let me do this. And he actually, which goes for me kind of, the look on his face when he acquiesces, that to me shows that there was enough of Andy himself in there to like to go along and say yes, do it. And but what's great about that is that it wasn't just like the new programming, it's like it's updated his software, it repaired what was wrong with him. So now, even though he's had it removed, he's upgraded. And so it's one of the joys of the latter part of this movie is like seeing him fully functional as he should be. And I think that'll also be fun going into the next movie, getting to see their dynamic that way, which will be, he's still telling the dad jokes, but he's much more capable than he was. So yeah, I liked getting to see that version of Andy too.
Yeah, I think the way, even though it's also just it's just a cool to see Andy become more functional and badass. It's actually the idea about like an upgrades. It actually becomes kind of a running theme for the movie because in addition to when Andy gets his much overdue upgrade, as he says, the Rook actually uses that language directly as his stated motivation in his big monologue, where he talks about how mankind was never truly suited for space colonization. They're simply too fragile. They're too weak. The work of this station aimed to change that. The perfect organism. That's how we should refer to human beings. So I set this wrong right. I took its gift for humanity. And then when he just goes on to describe the Z01 compound, he says, this is a much needed and well overdue upgrade for humanity. We simply cannot wait for evolution anymore. And it's, it's almost in a weird way makes Rook's motivations, again, not, I won't quite say sympathetic, but it makes them understandable that like in his way, he is actually doing something for the common good. It's twisted because it's through the, Weyland-Yutani, and they obviously, if they ever got this miraculous compound, they would use it in a selfish way and probably charge, up the wazoo for it, and only a select handful would get it who are willing to pay. But also because of the origins of this particular compound, we knowing like what it is from like the Prometheus, films and things, that obviously there is going to be a cost to this upgrade. And in Andy's case, the cost of the upgrade was he temporarily lost his humanity. And then unfortunately, that is what happens with this upgrade as well. It's a poisoned gift.
Yeah, and the thing is, like how much does Rook know about what this miracle cure actually does? Like there's questions on the table of the timing of like, when certain experiments were done, when he was still in working condition. He seems to be pretty all-knowing about everything that went on the ship. So presumably he knows that those experiments didn't exactly go as planned. So for all his talk about for the benefit of mankind, it seems like he probably knows it wasn't a success. But maybe enough of a success to get back to the company so they can further work on it. But it's like, but it's that horrible hubris of humanity that, sort of we're going to recreate what is essentially the God formula. And at the end of the day, it's a bastardization of it. And it's not quite right. And and who could have guessed? And yeah, it has absolutely horrific consequences for Kay in particular. Rain has the right of it. She's like, I don't trust this. Don't inject yourself with it. And but Kay, being really worried about that she's not going to survive and that her baby's not going to survive, and without enough information, ends up making the choice for herself to inject herself with it, which was not a good decision. But
yeah. And again, I think it was the movie was very smart to have Kay be the one to make that choice, because if their other characters, even if Rain and Tyler had done that basically in the hopes of saving her, Kay would have not had agency in that decision, and what would have happened to her would be even more horrific. But in this moment, as you said, she doesn't have the full context, but she's the one who makes that choice out of desperation, but also of love for her unborn child. And the fact that, it actually seems to work okay for her, it seems to heal her wound, but her child bears the terrible cost of it.
But it seems like then shortly before she dies, she like reaches down, into her upper body, and there does seem to be like some gooey stuff. So I'm not sure she was going to make it out of that okay herself.
I don't know. I mean, like we've seen similar elements of body horror with like the Prometheus movies, like what happens to like Logan Marshall Green's character after David starts using the formula on him. And I think that you're right, probably in the long term, but like again, it's just enough for us to think, oh, maybe it worked. But there's like the ticking time bomb in the back of your mind of like, there's got to be a cost. And then when the costs start, when she gets, because another element of the Alien franchise that always seems to happen that, I think is very effective, is they get away from the main spaceship and the main alien, and they're on like the getaway craft, and you're like, there's going to be another beat. There's going to be an alien on the ship. That happens in the original Alien, that happens in Aliens, that happens in, in Prometheus. Like, so it's like, it always happens in this point. You're like, I don't think any aliens got on the ship. And then you're like, but oh fuck. And when Kay's pod starts to go haywire, you're like, oh no. And
just the body horror that they show of like this thing crawling, like coming out of her, and then like it's just so sick and so disgusting. and so great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what comes out of it, I can, I'm guessing that there's probably a subset of people who did not care for this, but I thought it was absolutely brilliant, precisely because it was a dark, twisted version of the Engineers.
Yes.
From Prometheus. I thought that like it's exactly why humanity shouldn't screw around with stuff like this, because in an effort to like create, like the ultimate life form, you're actually going to create a bastardized, like twisted version of it. And yeah, it's like this, it's exactly what it was. It was like an alienized version of an Engineer, and like so creepy and so terrifying. And I thought it worked brilliantly, like on a thematic level, and then just on the level of just being purely terrifying as well.
And they did the full reveal of it so well, because like, when Kay gives birth, she actually gives birth to this weird like pod-like thing. And when it opens up, the baby actually looks somewhat kind of normal, and then very quickly it's revealed, oh no, it's not. It's not normal. And it's one of those things where like, just the the design of the creature is terrifying, because of it's in human proportions, and the way it moves, and the way it has just enough humanity and just enough of the alien and just enough of the Engineers to let that it's a true monster. But then also plays into another moment from perhaps one of the less celebrated elements of the franchise, Alien Resurrection, where we've seen alien human hybrids before. And in that movie, actually, the twist was that the alien human hybrid actually recognized Ripley as its mother and was trying to go to her and killed its actual alien mother in its place. And that was actually in the back of my mind as the creature is approaching. Hey, and it was like, is it going to recognize her? And then it quickly you start, no, it doesn't. It's going to kill her. And it's a horrible end for a character that we love so much because, you know, again, she's been portrayed as very sweet and very, you know, loving and very loyal, and Isabela Merced is so wonderful in the role. And then, you know, the one consolation of it is that they do kind of spare us seeing the actual like moment of her death, but we know what happens. You know, the fact that she's confronted with her what once was her baby and is now this monstrous thing, like to see that in her final moments is, you know, terrible.
Yeah. And then Andy doesn't fare very well against it. And I like at a certain point, like, you know, Rain is trying to like lift and carry him, but at a certain point, this is like when it's sort of echoing the fact that this movie started off with her deciding that she was going to leave him behind, and then I sort of like the fact that she's presented with a situation where she has no choice but to leave him behind. He's not moving, and she's being chased by this monster, and so even though ultimately she's going to, you know, look after him and she will eventually fix him, I just liked this idea of like being confronted with something so horrifying that she literally has no choice but to just like leave him behind and like run off, you know, trying to save herself. And what I absolutely loved about this sequence from a sound design perspective is that they use, I don't know if it was exactly it, but it was very reminiscent of the sound that you hear in all the Alien trailers of that siren going off.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's almost a part of like the Alien soundtrack, even though it's never quite been in any one of the actual movies. And this was the time that and it just sets you on edge so much. It's like, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? And I just thought, yeah, from a sound design perspective, I thought that was such a brilliant masterstroke. And yeah, and this thing is so fucking terrifying, just chasing after her, and then like, and she gets in the suit, which is very reminiscent of Ripley in the first Alien, and then she, you know, has this plan to get down, you know, at the bottom of the ship, and she's going to release it. And then it comes up behind her, knocked her down, and it's just like, you know, and she thinks that she's, you know, gotten rid of it, but then it's like holding onto the thing and it's in her face. And I just, I just love that it ends with when it finally, you know, when she finally pulls the lever and it falls away. And it's just, die, mother. You know? It's so visceral. And yeah, you need, like, you're right, all of these Alien movies have like the false final confrontation, and then you've got the really, you know, the really big one, and this like fit the bill for that. And again, I want to like tip my cap to Benjamin Wallfish and his music, because in addition to the sound design of like the sirens going off, the music of this sequence was just like, it's terrifying in all the right ways and completely like, you know, matches what's on screen, and just really just makes you feel like you're, no pun intended, but that your heart is going to burst out of your chest. And it's just, yeah, I think it's one of the best final acts of any Alien movie, because it's like, it's so purely terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's the just element of like, again, putting a new spin on something that's very, you know, familiar in terms of its structure and its pacing. Like, we kind of know instinctually what the beats of this are going to be, but it feels fresh because they're of the setting, and, you know, and like, and the novel of this, the nobility of this particular character. But like the fact that this entire time, like this station, and now this current, their escape craft is basically hovering over this set of planetary rings, and it's the fact that they're going to crash into these rings that's the element of danger that we're dealing with. That's a little bit different than like the stereotypical, like the reactor's about to explode and we're about to, everything's going to get vaporized. Here it feels much more visceral. They're not going to explode. They're going to get pulverized if they don't do this. And just like, this movie rightly got nominated for best visual effects at the Oscars. And I think that the sequence where they're like, the ship is, skimming above the rings, and Rain is trying desperately to, attach the final clamp from the cargo hold so that she can eject it and the creature into the rings and destroy them. Like, it's just visually beautiful on top of everything else.
Yeah, absolutely stunning. And yeah, I would have nominated for, numerous other technical categories as well. Yeah. But I'm glad it at least got a visual effects nom. Yeah, God. It's just so great. And yeah, I just want to say again how like freakishly disturbing I find the design of that hybrid, and creature. It's like it's a risky thing because, you mentioned Alien Resurrection, and that was like that creature design was not necessarily well received.
Yeah.
And so it is a risky thing, but I think they really pulled it off, in particular because it so reflected the engineers.
Yeah.
But like, and the engineers are not without their own, like, they're terrifying in their own way. But this just like, this made the engineers look like cuddly teddy bears. This just really showed like what goes wrong when, like, with science run amok and like messing with things that you shouldn't mess with. And yeah, I thought it was really brilliant that they went with that for like the final beat of the film, and because it brought it like thematically so much in line with the other films in a way that surprised me. I mentioned earlier, like, I was kind of bummed that they weren't gonna like follow on from the last couple of movies, but in a lot of ways I think this film actually was interested in bringing a lot of things together and like recognizing, the different areas of this franchise. Even though I haven't always been super crazy about the idea of the engineers as brought forward in Prometheus, because I kind of like the mystery of the space jockey in the original film. I really liked what they did with the mythology of it here, of like that Will and Yutani is still like pursuing that, like, the ability of the gods to like create the kind of life they want to fashion, and the best that they can come up with is this like horrific, like, just freakish amalgamation of of what they're actually after with is what was created with the aliens. And yeah, I just think all of that is like, it's so good. I think it's so right for this series to like show what happens when, because just science gone wrong. And that's why I kind of really liked where they were going with Alien Covenant and David like doing his experimentations and like creating his own life form in the sense being the alien. And so I'd like, I think the franchise gets really disturbing and twisted when they go down that road. So I hope they continue to do that because it's it's fun in a terrifying, sick way.
No, one of the things that I really I liked about this movie is, as you said, it kind of pulls in elements from every preceding film in the Alien canon, and kind of pulls them together and makes them work. And that specifically that in that monologue from Rook that I mentioned earlier, when he talks about the Z01 compound as Prometheus fire, the divine gift to humanity. And it's one, it's just cool language and cool imagery, but also it really kind of brings this into the level of like myth and tragedy, because yes, there is one school of thought that's like the aliens are scarier if you just don't know anything about them, and they are like this naturally evolved organism that has become just like almost unstoppable with how they've perfected the evolutionary process. And then there's the other school where it's like it's terrifying that like they're basically they're a bioweapon gone wrong, that even the engineers, these like great geneticists and creators, like they couldn't control this thing, and ultimately it ended up being their doom as well. And this movie kind of plays with that idea as well, of like the aliens just essentially like the aliens are a naturally occurring creature, but ultimately, humanity's worst instincts in trying to harness their power are what is bringing this down upon them. Like if Weyland Yutani would just like stop fucking trying to weaponize the aliens, like we wouldn't have these movies, because we wouldn't have this problem. But that is obviously a central theme in and of itself. And I will note that, like, I hope that if the movie series continues, that they do continue to play with these ideas, because as excited as I am for Alien Earth, one of the things that I have heard is that Noah Hawley kind of had his own ideas about like the alien creature, and he is kind of not really going to be acknowledging Prometheus and Alien Covenant in his interpretation. And we'll have to see how that goes, because obviously, it still could be a great show on its own. But I do think that those elements of the mythology have value, even if they have not, they're not the things that everyone loves about the franchise.
Well, and that'll actually be fun to discuss on its own, because, and I've talked before about my relationship with canon and like how it's, it serves the purpose if you're telling an ongoing story, but also like even with this particular franchise, like when I watch the original Alien, I tend not to factor in the later stories.
Yeah.
The space jockey is just the space jockey. He's not necessarily an engineer for me when I watch that original film. But yet when I watch the later films, I will factor in, everything that came before. And, I have different levels of like storytelling canon based on like what's important to me in the moment. And so I don't think that'll be a stumbling block for me when I watch the new series, if it goes in a different direction. I know other people will get upset about if it doesn't adhere to, this canon or whatever. In a way that almost kind of makes it more fun to me. I like it when other people get upset about things like that. Yeah. But like, I know he's gonna craft a fucking great story just because of what he's done before. And yeah, and like it's just based off of what we've seen so far. It looks like it's everything I would have wanted from a Noah Hawley Alien show. So if he decides he wants to go his own direction in certain things, then fine. Let it be Alien Legends. That's fine with me. Just so long as it's rip roaring good yarn. That'll be enough for me.
Yeah, and I ultimately feel similarly. I'm very excited for the show. I have a complicated relationship with the canonicity of certain franchise, because there's some I'm very devoted to, like, you know, the Star Wars films, and then sometimes where I just push back on people like trying to erase certain movies from the canon just because I don't like it when they do that to movies that I like. But then there are also elements of where in this very franchise where I am challenged by that, where like I love Aliens, and Aliens is like a perfect little duology, and then we get to the beginning of Alien 3, and the thing that enrages us both happens with Newton Hicks, and anytime I watch that movie, I'm always just like, fuck, I hate this part, but I can accept the rest of the movie. But anytime I'm just watching Alien and Aliens, my instinct would be like, and they all lived happily ever after.
I think everything, and we will talk about this one day, because we have talked like very seriously, and we were going to do it at some point, and then it dropped by the wayside. We were going to go ahead and have a canon discussion, which we should think about when we want to pencil that in. But I think it's just a thing of growing up as a fan of the Highlander franchise. You learn to not be married to canon. Because there is a franchise that, like, the very first movie, Connor McLeod wins the prize, at the end of the film. Second movie, all of a sudden, he's an alien. And, and like, he wasn't born on Earth, he was part of a revolution on another planet, and he was made immortal when he was sent to Earth. And it's like, what? And then the TV series, everything went back to the way it was in the movie, but he didn't actually win the big prize at the end of the movie. The battle among immortals is still ongoing. And then the third movie comes out, and it goes back to the canon of the first film, except there was one immortal left. He didn't know, and he didn't actually win the prize, but now he's fighting for the prize. And like, and then the fourth movie incorporates like the movies and the TV show. And the best thing that they're doing for that franchise now is they're starting it over with a clean slate. But I love, like, there's so many things about that franchise that I love, but so much of it doesn't make a lick of sense from a canon standpoint. And then you get into the X-Men movies with, all their continuity issues. It's like, I think it's because the stuff I loved growing up had no sense of continuity whatsoever. Which is why it doesn't matter that much to me.
Yeah, and this is a franchise again where, like, I, even though I love it dearly, like, I'm not as precious about the lore, and in certain respects. One, just because it is kind of a mess. Two, because as long as you have the aliens themselves, and people fighting to survive against, and the recognizable templates that make it an alien movie, like, I'm always going to be on board for it. And three, like a little bit more of a humorous aside, I feel like you give up the right to any kind of continuity complaints when you indulge in crossover, things. And the fact that this movie also crosses over with like the Predator universe is where I, because like actually like one of the things is the new trailer for Predator Badlands, the movie's coming out in November, has a Elle Fanning playing a Weyland-Yutani synthetic that lets you know that, like, on top of the other already complicated mythology, we have to factor in the predators too. They're out there somewhere, and at that point you're just like, just have fun with this stuff, man.
Which actually now has me excited to look into that. The fact that there's a Weyland-Yutani, android. I'm like, okay, now I'm on board for that. I still have to go back and watch Prey. I still have not seen it. And
you absolutely should. It's one of the best movies in that franchise, like right up there with the original, in my opinion.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, so, so that was a bit of not really a digression. We were still very much talking about the Alien franchise, but needless to say, I'm on board for any storytelling in this world, even if it's got different continuity and stuff, whatever. But yeah, I thought this was a great movie, and like I'm really glad that we did this discussion now, because now I feel totally primed and ready for the show, which is starting on Tuesday. I'm so excited. And yeah, and like just the fact that I know a lot of people cite Fargo as like the reason why they're excited for Noah Hawley Alien. For me, it's Legion. I actually have not seen Fargo, but I swear by Legion. I think it's one of the best television shows ever created, and one of the best things out of the Marvel universe. And so like I highly recommend, like, if anybody's excited for this show or they watch it and they're like, I want more of stuff like this, you know, check out Legion, because I'm just going to say it's fucking off the hook. Like, it's insane and it's crazy and it's so much fun. And yeah, it's great, especially if you're an X-Men fan. But yeah, and this movie was great. I'm glad that like a year after the fact, I watched it and I was like, yeah, this is a really good one. And it's one of my favorite out of the franchise, for sure. In part so much because like there was a lot of freshness to it with the new cast, and you know what they did, and I know like I heard some people sort of talk down about the movie. We're like, oh, this is an Alien movie for teenagers just because the cast is younger, and I'm like, just you realize that you were young when you saw the original movies, and and maybe the cast was a bit older, but they weren't that much older. And it's not being a grouch. I think the fact that we have a young fresh cast in this movie is one of its biggest strengths, and part of the reason why it was so successful. And yeah, I thought it was great, and I stand by the fact that it was one of my favorite movies of last year. And I was really happy watching it that I bought this one on physical media, because it looked fucking great.
This is one I do not own on physical media yet. I have it on digital because I couldn't wait to watch it again, so I made the digital purchase, and I haven't upgraded on the physical media yet, but I will consider doing so in the future. And I do hope that, like, as we said, that if, there's been reports there is a sequel in development to this movie because it did well enough, and I don't know if that will be continuing the story of Rain and Andy, or if it will just be almost like more of an anthology and it'll be a completely different cast. I kind of hope that we do pick up with these characters, because I do think Rain and Andy are great characters that would be worth following. But regardless, as long as the movies continue to just pay this level of, respect to the traditions of the Alien franchise, but still find new ways to innovate, I think that I'm always going to be excited for a new Alien movie or TV show, as I'm incredibly excited for Alien Earth. So, and we will be talking about that in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, I personally very much hope they continue with these characters. I don't know what I know. The thing with Ridley Scott is he likes to work with new, fresh talent every couple of years. So yeah. I think that's why Alien Covenant ended up with a different, with a fresh cast over focusing on, on Shaw, for instance, which I was kind of bummed about. Yeah, I don't know how Fede Álvarez, feels in that regard, but I feel like, based off of comments I read from him, I do feel like we're going to continue on with these characters, and at least I hope so. and I'm very excited if that ends up being the case. Okay. Anything else we missed out on that you wanted to comment on before we close this up?
No, I mean, I think that, this is going to be one of our shorter discussions, short for us, even though, we've already, talked for 2.5 hours. But I don't think it's because this movie isn't as like thematically rich as some of the other movies that we've discussed. I think it's just because this is ultimately a movie that's a little bit leaner in terms of just its the story on its spine. It is a story ultimately about survival, but it is a story that tells that very like economical story in such a fresh and compelling way, and still has thematic richness to it that is one of the reasons I think it's so successsul. And
it's just the nature of the story. It's a thriller that but I think I think we did a good job of like covering like the characters and the thematic elements of the movie, as you said. And it's 2.5 hours is a good amount of time to spend on something. It's just that we normally go crazy. But yeah, no, I'm very happy with the discussion we had here. I thought it was, it was really good, and we didn't shortchange anything. And I enjoyed talking about this immensely.
Yep, so did I.
Yeah. Okay, so just again, just reminding everybody what we have coming up. Next week will be our 25th anniversary discussion of the Patriot, followed by us talking about Thunderbolts, then the first 4 episodes of Alien Earth, and the week after that, Batman Forever, the 30th anniversary, which again, for both Alien Earth and Batman Forever, we're going to have AK joining us for those, and I'm so excited for that, especially for Batman Forever, just because I know like we were gonna have a lot of fun on that one anyway, but I feel with AK joining us, it's gonna be a riot. It's gonna be so much fun. But again, I know I've talked about this a couple times, and when we actually have the discussion, it'll be really fun to dive into it. But I just like, it's always been one of my pet peeves that when people talk down about Batman Forever, I understand if it's not your cup of tea, but like, it was such a phenomenally successful film when it came out in 1995, and I feel like, it is one of the most outrageously fun, bonkers comic book movies that's ever been made. And like, I'm really looking forward to like just shining a light on like how much fun it is, and the fact that I'm actually a really big fan of the movie.
I'm always down to talk Batman, and I'm very keen to revisit Batman Forever because obviously I've seen it many times, but it's been a while since I fully delved back into it, and I'm looking forward to doing so with fresh eyes and getting ready to embrace it for all of its its many eccentricities, because sometimes comic book movies can just be fun, and I think that is what that movie does very well.
I just popped into my head. I love it. Jim Carrey in the movie. Your entrance was good. His was better. It's going to be so much fun talking about that. And also, then we'll be talking about the score in that film, which is by Elliot Goldenthal, who's another Alien composer. He worked on the score for Alien 3.
Yep.
So yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you all for joining us tonight. As we said, a bit of a shorter discussion than usual, but still over 2.5 hours. Like I feel like that's perfectly fine. And had a lot of fun. And again, like, thank you for everybody. Tonight we saw Danny and Laura. Thank you for stopping in, and everybody else who watches us later on. Please subscribe to the channel and join us next week for the Patriot. Until then, have a great night, and we will see you later. Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I just when you exited out, like I was left there myself, and I wasn't sure.
I hit the wrong button, everyone. We're still broadcasting, so apologies for that. All right, now we're really going. Goodbye. See you later.
Take two.